Hello. Okay, I have just finished work, even though I'm working from home, still dressed as if I go into the office, which just helps me maintain a sense of routine and a bit of order in the slightly weird times that we're living in now. But we're going to jump straight into today's story, which again is another classic fairy tale which has had the Disney treatment, and it is Beauty and the Beast. Although this is the original version, which you might find a bit different from what Disney did. But it begins with a merchant, a very wealthy merchant who had six daughters and six sons. And he was that rich, they could all afford to live in a state of great extravagance. But one day, as these things happen, tragedy struck. The merchant's fleet of ships were all destroyed in a storm at sea. He lost his home, he lost everything. People who he had trusted turned out to be less than honest. He lost everything. The family lost everything. At first, his daughters thought that surely their friends would take them in, look after them. This was not the case. Having lost their money and their status, they also suddenly lost their friends. Many of them seemed to blame their extravagant lifestyle for what had befallen them, as if it was deserved or even a consequence. But all they had left was a small house out in the country, in the middle of nowhere. So that is where they all went to live. The sisters kept house during the day while the father and the sons became farmers on the land. That's how they survived. And for a while it was hard work. Only the youngest daughter seemed to try and make light or any fun of this, entertaining her brothers and sisters and father, just one, with singing and dancing. And long had she secretly been the father's favourite, the cleverest and the prettiest. And so she was called Beauty. Now, they adapted to their life there, as hard as it was. Until one day some welcome but also disruptive news came. A single ship from the merchant's fleet had docked in the port. They all wanted to go, all of them, and see what riches that had survived. But the merchant urged caution. He would go alone and see how things were. If a sense of status was returned, he would come back. He asked each of them what they wanted. Well, Beauty's sisters asked for jewellery and dresses and shoes. When it came to Beauty, she asked only for her father's safe return. And her sisters scorned her for this, as if she was mocking them for them having asked for anything at all. Eventually, Beauty said that all she would want really was a single rose, a red rose. In all the time that they had lived out in the countryside, she had never seen one and missed them. So the merchant set off. When he reached town, when he reached the dock, well, it was his ship. It was loaded with goods, but there were still debts to pay off after he had lost his fortune. By the time these had been paid, there was very little left for him to return home. And as he travelled back, a storm came. A savage storm. The merchant lost his way in the woods. While searching for the way out, he came upon a castle. He entered the castle gates, took his horse to the stables, which were full of hay and well stocked, stabled his horse, left it some food, went up to the castle. No answer. There didn't seem to be anyone there. The door was open, so in he went, to shelter from the rest of the storm. He wandered from empty room to empty room, searching for anyone that was there, till eventually he found a great hall where a fire blazed, a chair in front of it. He was tired, exhausted, and soaked through from the storm. He settled himself down in front of the fire, warming himself. Eventually fell asleep. When he woke, driven by his hunger, he was surprised to find a small table next to him. On it was a tray filled with cakes and meats, which he assumed could only be for himself. And he was hungry. He ate well, and wasn't long before he nodded off again for a much longer time. When he woke, he explored the castle a little more, still could find no one. He fancied that he could bring his sons and daughters there and they could live there quite happily. Didn't seem to be anybody else's. Looking from a window, he noticed in the garden a rose bush and remembered Beauty's request. If he could only take one gift back, it would be better than nothing. So he went to the stables, readied his horse, before he left went to the garden and cut a single rose. But doing this, there was a terrible howl from behind him. From out of the garden, midst of the garden, huge and terrible, a long snout, like that of a crocodile, a pig's nose at the end, was a horrific beast. Ingrate! I welcome you into my castle. I feed you. I let you rest by the fire, and you show gratitude by stealing from me. The merchant fell to his knees, terrified, begging for forgiveness. Your words mean nothing. I'll kill you for this. As terrified as he was, the merchant managed to blurt out, explaining what had brought him there, how he'd been lost in the storm, and how he had not meant to steal, that the rose was meant for his daughter. It was all she had asked for. The beast stopped at this. A daughter. The merchant explained that he had 6 daughters, 6 sons. The beast softened a little. Told the merchant that he was free to go on the condition that one of his daughters took his place. They must come willingly. And if they did not, he must return himself. And if he did not, the beast would hunt him down and drag him back. The merchant readily agreed to this, still terrified. Asked if he was free to go. The beast commanded that he go back to the castle, wait till the bell chimed on the next day. Till then, he would be fed and he would rest. Well, too terrified to refuse the beast's orders, the merchant went back, and there he found a meal ready for him. He did not feel any hunger, only fear, regret over what he had agreed to. But he thought it best to eat something, lest the beast see him as ungrateful. And so, the next morning, when the bell chimed, The merchant went down and found his horse ready. The beast told him he had a month. Either he came back or he returned with one of his daughters. Away he went. His horse seemed to move faster, swifter than it ever had before, and it was not long until he arrived home. The rest of his family came out overjoyed, relieved. He'd been gone for so long. Had things gone well? The merchant sadly explained everything that had happened. He handed Beauty a red rose, lamented that she knew not what it had cost him. Well, this piqued the children's curiosity even more, and what did the merchant mean by this? What happened? So the merchant explained how they were not rich. There was nothing left after he had paid off his debts, that he'd been lost in a storm on the way back, how he had found the castle, an enchanted castle it would seem, and how it was overloaded by a terrible beast who he had unknowingly slighted by taking a rose, and of the deal that he had struck. Well, his daughter scorned Beauty. This was her fault. She had asked for a rose. The merchant's sons, outraged, took up the cry that they would march upon the castle and kill the beast. No. They didn't see him. They would be no match for this monster. And Beauty, well, Beauty admitted it was her fault. She agreed, to her father's horror, that she would go to the beast's castle. She would be his prisoner, his prey. Nothing would dissuade her. And so a month passed, and on the last day, before Beauty and her father made ready to go back to the beast's castle, she hugged her brothers and sisters goodbye, split amongst them her meagre belongings. And off they went back to the castle. Again, the horse seeming to know the way, the journey seeming to take no time at all, as if the horse flew rather than ran. It was nightfall when they approached the castle, and when they rode through the gates, they were greeted by a crescendo of fireworks that lit the entire building. Bathed in light, shone from each window. Trying to hide her fear, Beauty joked that this was quite a show. The beast must be pleased indeed if this is how he greeted his prisoner. They stabled the horse, went into the castle. A great meal was ready, prepared for them. The merchant explained that it was best that they eat to please the beast. As frightened as Beauty was, she did find she was hungry. After a time, they heard the creature approaching. When Beauty looked upon it, it was more terrible than she even imagined. The beast greeted them gruffly, with courtesy. "Good evening, old man. Good evening, girl." Beauty was too terrified to reply, but the merchant bowed, greeted the beast, explained that he'd come back, that his daughter take his place. The beast considered Beauty. "Did you come willingly?" she had. Well, the beast instructed that they were to stay the night, and in the morning they would find 2 empty chests in their room. These chests were to be filled with as many riches as they could fill them with. It was only right that the merchant's family should have something in return for giving up his daughter. So the next morning they woke, sure enough the two chests were there. The room was filled with precious gems and gold, the cupboards, dresses, clothes of all sorts. At first they filled the chest with gold and the jewels, but thought that the clothes would be more practical. They took the gold and the jewels out, filled them with clothes. No matter how full they filled them, there seemed to be more room, till they were so heavy they could barely be moved. The merchant lamented this. The beast has played us for a fool. Gives us these, but we cannot move them. Beauty didn't quite agree with this. As terrible as he seemed, he did seem honest. And they went down to breakfast. Afterwards, they went out into the courtyard where two horses awaited and the beast. On one horse were the two chests. The other was meant for the merchant. He was forced to give a hasty farewell before he and the horses were away out of the castle, leaving Beauty alone with the beast. She wept. She did not see much of the beast during her time there. He left her alone. During the day she was free to explore the castle and all of its wonders. Some rooms were filled with more musical instruments that she could possibly try in a day. Another room was filled with every book she'd read and every book she wanted to read, and it didn't seem that she would have enough time in this world to read everything that was in there. At night, she slept and was visited by the strangest of dreams. She was walking through a grove by a stream. The most handsome man she had ever seen, smiling, approached her, greeted her, and told her that not to fear. She was quite safe within the castle. She could have anything that her heart desired. And he told her that she should not be so easily deceived by appearances, and not to trust her eyes. Well, she woke, puzzled by these dreams. She explored the castle grounds, and when walking in the garden one afternoon, recognised the stream, the grove, as the one from her dreams, although there was no sign of a handsome prince. She came across a room which was filled with portraits, and one portrait was of the prince, of whom she still dreamt. Well, each night the dream was very much the same. The prince telling her not to fear, not to trust her eyes, but to trust her heart. And often there would be a stately woman who would tell Beauty to be true to her heart, to show courage, to continue to be brave. And as little as Beauty saw of the beast, every evening, without fail, when the dinner was ready, Beauty would sit at the table and the beast would join her. He was not of a ferocious nature, despite his looks. In fact, he seemed quite simple and slow-witted. But he always asked the same question at the end of every meal. Beauty, do you love me? Would you marry me? Well, when he had first asked this, Beauty Scared, she did not know what to say. What was she to say? The beast merely told her that she should answer honestly, without fear. Sorry, beast, I cannot marry you. The beast would nod and sadly leave her alone. Well, Beauty continued to explore the castle. It seemed to hold endless wonders. She would find rooms filled with materials and crafts that would occupy her beyond the days. She once found a room where each window was blackened, a seat under each one. But if she were to sit in one of these seats, the window opposite would come to life and show the most wonderful performance plays. Each seat was a different play. She would find rooms filled with the most beautiful birds. Some parrots would imitate and talk with her. And on an evening when the beast came, she would tell the beast of how she had spent her days. As always, the beast would end the evening by asking if she loved him, if she would marry him. Her answer was always no. And always there was the dream of the prince, sometimes calling her cruel for making him so sad. Beauty had wondered if maybe the prince was being held captive by the beast, and she was there to save him somehow, rescue him. But as much as she explored the castle and the grounds, the only evidence she found was the portrait. Now as time went on, as happy as she was there, as much as there was everything to fulfill her every desire, Beast noticed that Beauty was becoming sad, withdrawn a little. So he asked her one night what it was that made her so unhappy in a place where she could have almost anything. Beauty admitted that she missed her father. She missed her brothers. She even missed her sisters. She would like to visit them. The beast wept at this, but he could not deny her. Beauty promised she would come back 2 months and she would return. She would not abandon him altogether. Despite his appearance, he had never harmed her. He'd always been gracious, courteous to her, as slow-witted and simple as he was. The beast gave her a ring. All she had to do was go to bed that night, turn the ring. She would wake up, be with her family. Before she slept, she would find 4 travelling chests in her room, and these could be filled with as many wonders as they could be filled with as gifts for her father, brothers and her sisters. As excited as Beauty was, she felt sad in leaving the beast. That night when she had filled the chests, she slipped the ring on her finger, turned it. And in her dreams the prince was sad, accused her of being cruel for abandoning him. Beauty protested. She would come back. She was only going to visit her father and her family. She was not abandoning him. She would return. The prince merely smiled sadly and nodded. The next morning Beauty awoke not in her usual room in the castle, but a room she did not quite recognise. Then she heard a familiar voice, her father out in the hallway. and opening the door, there he was. He was amazed. How had she got there? Had she escaped? Had she snuck in overnight? Her brothers and sisters were equally amazed to see her. They were all quite sure the beast would have killed her. And she looked well, healthy, dressed extravagantly. Beauty told them everything. How the beast had allowed her to come visit. She had promised to return in 2 months. He had told her that all she had to do was turn the ring again and wish that she was back in her palace with her beast. Only 2 months. Well, her brothers and sisters lamented this, but she would hear nothing of it. Belle had done quite well. The treasures from the 2 chests they had taken back them had managed to get them back into the city, and they had modest means. See, the 4 chests that Beauty had brought with her were a welcome gift, certainly for her sisters. But Beauty found that after a few days, she missed the beast. She missed the palace. She was in the way here, underfoot, out of touch with her family. And as the time neared for her to return, despite all of this, they begged her each day, stay a little longer. Till the very day that she was meant to return. When she slept that night, she dreamt for the first time since leaving the palace of her handsome prince. She found him in the garden, behind some bushes near a concealed cave entrance. Barely moving, a stately woman standing over him. What's happened? What? Ah, Beauty, said the stately woman. How easily people break their promises. As you have broken yours. This terrified Beauty. When she woke the next day, she resolved that night she would return. She bid her father, her sisters and her brothers goodbye. When evening came, she turned the ring, said that she wished she was back in her palace with her beast. She was woken the next morning by the familiar chiming of a bell. She was back in her room. She spent the day wandering the castle, enjoying its magnificent rooms that she remembered so well, waiting for evening, where she might see the beast. Evening came, she went down to eat. But the beast did not appear. She called his name, ran out into the garden, down by the grove, by the stream. She ran to where in her dream the bushes concealing the cave entrance had been, and there, lying, seemingly not moving, was the beast. Beauty cried out in despair. She wept. The beast was not quite dead yet. He sighed. You have come back. Relieved, delighted, Beauty revived him as best she could with some water, and together they went back to the castle. Beauty explaining that she couldn't live without him, that she had grown to love this beast. As weak as the beast was, he was overjoyed by this. And he asked again, would you marry me? When Beauty said yes, there was a sudden fanfare of trumpets. She was blinded by a blazing light. It streamed in from the windows of the great hall. When she regained her vision, standing before her was not the beast, but the prince from her dreams, restored back to his true self. He barely had time to explain before they heard a commotion out in the courtyard, carriages approaching. When they looked out from the carriages, from one stepped the stately woman from Beauty's dreams. From another, a woman who, from her stature, from her standing, from her appearance, could only have been a queen. The stately woman explained that she was a fairy, sent to watch over the prince who had been cursed, turned into a beast. She explained how Beauty had broken the spell, and explained to the queen how her son had been freed by Beauty's love. But all the queen had to do was consent to the marriage, which the queen, overjoyed at having her son back, readily did so. The wedding was magnificent. Beauty's father and all of her family were in attendance, and they all lived there in the palace. And I believe that they lived happily ever after. So that version is quite different to the Disney one. I like it better, if I'm honest. I'm not quite sure why they changed it so much. It seems unnecessary. Maybe they could have had the sisters as the bad guys, rather than Gaston and the villagers. I guess they changed it around. I'm sure they still could have had decent songs in there, which the animated version has got. Obviously they did away with the good fairy, who she doesn't seem much of a plot device in the story, really. She hasn't got much to do with it at all. It's almost a little bit lackluster, but nevertheless, the curse is never fully explained either. I think it evolved in the story that he'd been cruel of heart, and so he was cursed, but it's never explained in the original what happened to him. Yeah, I mean, it's quite funny that Beauty never really makes the connection that the prince might be the beast, and that's what her dreams are all about. But never mind. I still think it's a good version of the story compared to what Disney did. I certainly didn't like the live action version. I thought that was fairly flat and unnecessary, and I don't know why they did it other than maybe to make money, but there we go. So there you are. That is the original version of Beauty and the Beast, which was originally French, I think. I'm not going to say the name because I'll pronounce it wrong, but I'll put it in the notes. So, I very much hope you enjoyed that. There's just one story tonight. I think it was quite long and quite involved there, so I don't want to tag another one on, and even if I was going to, honestly I haven't got one ready. I'll need to prepare for Friday, where I'll obviously be finishing off this week's classic fairy tales. I've got a vague idea of what I'm going to do, so again, as much as a surprise to you as it will be for me. But until then, I hope you're enjoying the week, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the week, and I will be back on Friday. See you then.